Hello and welcome to today's Blender BIM part 2 lesson, and today we learn just basic skills about the walls, how to customize the walls, and how to work with the walls to make sure the design feels very good. And so let's dive right in. So last time we learned about how to create and set up a Blender BIM project. We explored very basic stuff about how to create walls, connecting doors, maybe the roofing and stuff. But today we'll dive deeper into the walls and knowing how the walls operate in Bonsai BIM so that you can improve your workflow and know what you're working with. And so without wasting any time, let's dive right into the walls. So under this section, right section over here, and if you don't understand the layout or the interface of Blender BIM or Bonsai BIM or how to set it up, make sure to look at the previous video where we introduced the Bonsai BIM. So let's dive in and look at the walls. So under the wall section, we said it's under the wall tool. So in a Bonsai BIM, it usually comes with 4 default types of walls, and these type of walls are mainly classified with thickness. For example, I've created my custom 150 millimeters wall, but in a Bonsai BIM, when you open it, the kind of walls you get are the 50 millimeters thick wall, 100 millimeters thick wall, and 200 millimeters thick wall. So let's first create maybe a simple 50 millimeters wall, and then I just say Shift A X. I can constrain it under any side. For example, I want to constrain it into Y direction or the X direction. I can constrain it to that. So let's say I've locked it into X axis, and let's say I want a 10 meters wall, which is 10,000 millimeters. I just say okay and enter, and now you can see we have a simple 10 meters wall. So let's say now I want to create my own custom wall. So for example, let's say here you have a 200 millimeters wall, and if I create the wall and enter, you can see now it has a thickness of 200 millimeters. So for example, let's say, how about if I want to create a wall, let's say 225 millimeters, or even let's work with 225 millimeters for now, but you can create any kind of wall using this method. So for example, I have a 200 millimeters wall. I can just come and duplicate, and then you can see it's unnamed. I rename and say, let's say 225 millimeters, and say okay, and then close. Now the 225 millimeters, make sure it's active, and to make sure it's active, for example, you see I've selected the wall 100, and you can see it's the active one, so I'll select the 225 millimeters. So I just press Shift A, which we said is the default method or the shortcut of adding objects to your scene, and then I'll just create that wall, enter. But now you see it's not a 225 millimeters wall. And how do you confirm that? I'll come to my geometry and materials. I'm at the object materials. You can see the total thickness is 200 millimeters. So I'll just press here edit, and then come over here to edit and select 225, and then enter, save changes, and you can see the changes are saved. And then maybe I can save the file, and then I can create another. Let me select the wall again, and then enter. Then now when I select that wall, you can see it's now 225 millimeters. Okay, I hope that's understood for now. So now let's check under another very simple section of walls that we mainly misunderstand sometimes. So for example, let's say I want to create a door to my wall, and I add a door. For example, let's add a door. Then we have basically added a door, and to confirm that, you can come to maybe our drawing, and then you can see add a wall. We have this door created. So for example, let's say now, how do you know how the walls and the doors connect, and what kind of relationship does the door and the wall have, so that we can have that boolean cut in that door section. So for example, I select the wall, I come at the geometry and materials, and you can see at the geometric relationships, you can see there is other voids. So it's meaning like this, you can just do it like that. And other voids, you can see we have this section called opening, and that opening is the door. For example, let's say we undo it, and then you can see we remain with the door, but we don't have that cut on the wall. So let me undo it. So, and you have that cut. So that's how doors connect with the wall. So for example, let's say I want a very custom or very specific type of door. So for example, let's say, let me come and create a very funny type of door, RX90 GX, and then I can just set up edit mode, and then EZ, and then I can come to one, merge at center, and then I can come select to edge mode, GZ, and then I can just come maybe create a solidify modifier. Let's create it to be around let's say 600 millimeters. So basically it's for cutting through the wall, so you don't have to be that precise with it. So, and then you see it have come all the way to the other section. You make sure it has protruded on both sides of the wall. So I come to the object, select this object, come to my scene properties. Under the object information, I come and select the IFC feature element, opening element, and I assign IFC class. Now you can see now it is displayed as a wired. So I can select the wall, and then select the wall, press shift, then select that section. Under the geometric materials, at the voids, I can add opening, and then now you see you have that opening of the door, and then now you can create your custom door and fit it there. For example, let's just say that was the shape. So how that is how you create your custom objects. If you want maybe rounded windows or whatever kind of imaginary shape you may have, I think that explains how you do it. So that is one thing we do on it. So for example, now let us dive deeper into another thing. Let us delete everything. So for example, let me go into top view. I want to draw, let me select a wall 200, and then let me draw the wall very fast, and then enter. So you can see, let's say you have this very simple plan. So another thing that confuses people a lot is, how do I extend? For example, let's say I want this wall to extend to this wall. How do I do it? I can select the first wall, the wall that I want to extend, then select the wall where I want the other wall to reach, and then shift E, and then after shift E, now you can see there is this gap. How about if I want to connect? I just select the two, shift E, shift T, and now you can see I have connected the walls. The same happens, for example, let's say I want to duplicate this wall and press it at the center. I just press Shift D, which is duplicate. I can constrain it to the Y axis, and then let's say I want to go 5000 millimeters, and then I can duplicate this again. Let's say I also want 5000 millimeters. That's when we just 5000. So let's say we want these two walls to reach here, and you see we have these extensions to the external walls. So how do I do it? I just select one of the walls, Shift E. I can select the other one, Shift E, Shift T, and now you can see we have those walls. So this mainly happens when you're trying to create your drawings, and some walls doesn't reach to a point where you want to reach, so you can just use that command Shift E. Shift T is mainly used to join those wall joints at the edge. So I hope that is understood. So, and we have seen to duplicate objects we use the command Shift D. Is it okay? And if you have any other question about walls, feel free to ask on the comment section, and then we'll love your support. So make sure to like, share, subscribe, and we will meet on the next lesson. Thank you.